The notification comes at 6:47 in the morning. I'm still in my robe, standing at the kitchen counter with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, watching the fog settle over the water outside my apartment window. San Francisco fog, the kind that makes the whole city look like it's thinking about something it hasn't decided yet. My phone buzzes on the marble countertop. A text from my mother. Your father and I need you at the house Saturday. Dinner at 7. Important. No, good morning. No, how are you, sweetheart? Not even a period at the end, as if the sentence itself couldn't be bothered to finish. I set my mug down and stare at the message for a long moment. Then I type back, I'll be there. I've been saying those 3 words my entire life. Let me tell you something about growing up the older daughter in my family. People always assume the firstborn gets the best of everything. The attention, the expectations, the legacy. In some families, that's true. In mine, the math worked differently. My sister is 3 years younger than me. She has our mother's cheekbones and our father's ability to walk into any room and make it rearrange itself around her. Her name is Lydia. She went to school for art history, spent 2 years in Paris on a fellowship our parents quietly funded, came home, and opened a small gallery in Hayes Valley that my parents referred to as her little passion project. With the kind of pride that takes up all the air in the room. I went to school for civil engineering. I stayed in state to save money. I graduated in 3.5 years, worked 60-hour weeks at a firm downtown for 4 years, then left to start my own structural consulting company with 1 client and a lot of nerve. That client referred me to 2 more. Those 2 became 8. By the time I was 31, my company had 12 employees, 3 active contracts with major development firms, and a reputation in the Bay Area construction industry that I had built entirely with my own hands. My parents came to my gallery opening when Lydia launched her space on Valencia Street. They flew in from Phoenix, stayed at the hotel 2 blocks from her gallery, brought flowers and a bottle of Krug. When I signed the lease on my first office, I called my mother to tell her. She said, "That's wonderful, honey. Listen, I can't talk right now. Your sister's having a thing tonight and I need to help her get ready." Then she asked me to remind her what the name of my company was. I had told her 4 times. That is the texture of my childhood, and my adulthood, and every family dinner in between. Saturday comes. I drive the 4 hours to my parents' house in Scottsdale. The house is large in Spanish style with terracotta tiles and a fountain in the front courtyard that my mother had installed the year I graduated college. The same year she told me she and my father weren't in a position to help with my student loans. The fountain has a little bronze heron in the center. I have always hated that heron. There are already 2 other cars in the driveway when I arrive. I don't recognize the silver SUV, but I recognize the feeling, the slight tightening in my chest that happens every time I pull past those iron gates. Like my body remembers things my brain is still trying to negotiate with. The front door opens before I can knock. My mother stands in the doorway in a linen dress, her reading glasses pushed up on top of her head. She looks past me at my car for just a moment before she smiles. "You made it," she says, like I'd traveled through something difficult just to get here. I have. It's just not the 4 hours she's thinking of. I made it, I say. Inside, the house smelled like the eucalyptus candles she buys in bulk and something roasting in the oven. My father is in the living room, standing beside a man I've never seen before. Early 50s, silver at his temples, wearing a polo shirt that costs more than my first car. My mother introduces him as Donald, who turns out to be the husband of my mother's college friend, a woman named Patricia who was seated on the couch next to my Aunt Renee, both of them holding wine glasses and talking in the low, warm murmur of women who have known each other long enough to stop explaining themselves. Lydia is standing near the fireplace. She is wearing a silk wrap dress in a shade of deep green that makes her look like a painting. She is holding a glass of champagne, actual champagne, not Prosecco, and she is laughing at something Donald has said, head tilted back, one hand touching his arm briefly in the way our mother taught us when we were teenagers. "Touch the arm," she used to say. "People remember how you made them feel. You're here," Lydia says when she sees me, and she crosses the room and wraps both arms around me. She smells like the perfume she's been wearing since college, something French and warm. I hug her back. This is the thing that makes everything so complicated. I love my sister. I have always loved my sister. I just also know, with a clarity I can't argue my way out of, that she and I have not been living in the same family. I go looking for the bar. Dinner is at a long table on the back patio. String lights overhead, the desert evening cooling down from its afternoon high. Someone's playlist murmuring something with acoustic guitar. My mother has done the seating. Of course she has. I find my place card between Aunt Renee and Donald's adult son, a quiet 23-year-old named, he tells me twice, Garrett, who works in finance and seems to be waiting for the dinner to be over so he can go somewhere he actually wants to be. I understand this. I feel the same way. My parents are at the heads of the table. Lydia is seated at my mother's right hand. This is where she has always sat. The food comes out in stages. My mother does this thing she learned from a catering company once, courses instead of platters, so the evening stretches and the conversation has to fill the gaps. It's effective. It's also theater. I've watched her perform this particular production my entire adult life. The first course, the second. Everyone is talking about the gallery, about Lydia's upcoming show, about the artist she's just signed who apparently has the most extraordinary eye. Lydia describes a piece, a large-scale installation, mirrors and wire and sound, and even I can tell it sounds genuinely beautiful. That's the hard part. My sister is talented. She works at what she loves. None of this is her fault. None of it is mine either. It's somewhere between the main course and dessert that my mother stands up. She taps her wine glass with a spoon, not hard enough to ring clearly, just enough so people look up. My father is already smiling. He has the expression of someone who knows what's coming and is proud of knowing. I want to say something, my mother begins. I fold my hands in my lap. Your father and I have been thinking about this for a long time. You know how proud we are of both our girls. She pauses here. She looks at me, briefly, the way you look at a piece of furniture you're deciding whether to keep. But this year has been something special for Lydia, the gallery opening, the press, the relationships she's built. We want her to know how much she means to us. My father stands then, the way they've choreographed it, and he reaches under his chair. The box is navy blue. Small. The kind of box that means something. I watch Lydia's face as she takes it. The way her eyes go wide and then quickly compose themselves into graceful surprise. The kind of surprise that looks like it was practiced in a mirror. And then I think, stop. She didn't know she's actually surprised. That expression is real. I can't always tell the difference, and maybe that is the saddest part of all of this. Lydia opens the box. Inside is a bracelet. Rose gold, 2 bands intertwined with small diamonds along one side. I know the brand from the velvet interior of the box. My mother has worn their pieces for years. I know what these cost. The table applauds. Aunt Renee says, "Oh, how beautiful." Patricia leans over to see. Even Garrett sits up a little straighter. I keep my hands in my lap. My father starts talking. He goes on for a while about Lydia, about her talent, about how watching her build something she loves has been one of the great joys of their lives. He talks about the gallery opening, about the night they stood in that space and watched her welcome people in. He talks about her vision. He uses the word remarkable twice. He does not look at me. My mother is crying, just a little. The way she does when she wants people to know she is feeling something. Lydia is shaking her head slowly, pressing her lips together, that universal body language for, "I don't deserve this," which is actually its own kind of performance. I don't say that meanly. I'd just watched my whole life. And then my father finishes. He raises his glass. To Lydia, he says. Everyone raises theirs. I pick up my wine glass. I raise it. I take a sip. I set it back down on the white tablecloth and I look at the string lights above us and I think, with a kind of stunned clarity, I have been coming to this table my entire life. I have been sitting here waiting for my name. Dessert comes out. The conversation shifts. I answer questions from Aunt Renee about my work. She's the only person at this table who ever asks. And I describe a project, a mixed-use development in Oakland. And I use words like load-bearing and seismic analysis, and she listens politely even though I can tell she doesn't entirely follow. No one else asks. After dessert, after the coffee, after the moment when everyone stands and stretches and the evening tries to end gently, My mother pulls me aside near the kitchen. I think for one moment, the kind of irrational, cellular, deeply embarrassing hope that I should have stopped having years ago. I think she is going to say something. About the dinner. About my name not being in any of that. She says, "Can you help me carry in some of the plates?" I carry in the plates. I sleep in my old bedroom that night, in the full-size bed I had in high school, under a quilt my grandmother made before she died. My grandmother's name was Edith. She was a high school math teacher for 31 years, and she taught herself to sew during the summers, and she once told me, when I was 12 years old and crying about something I don't remember now, that the only people worth building a life around were the ones who clapped for you when you won. The ones who go quiet when you succeed, she said. Tell you everything you need to know. I thought about that a lot that night, lying in the dark, the quilt pulled up to my chin, the smell of my childhood house around me. I stared at the ceiling. I thought about my company, about the email I had gotten on Thursday, the one I had read 3 times, the one I had not told anyone about yet. Not my business partner Theo, not my closest friend, not my mother. I thought about the meeting I had scheduled for Monday, in a downtown office with a development group out of Chicago, and what they were likely to offer, and what I was likely to say. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the bracelet in the navy box. Then I turned over and I went to sleep. 6 weeks later, the conference room is on the 22nd floor of a building on California Street. The view is the bay, gray-blue and enormous, with a cargo ship moving slowly across it. I have been in a lot of conference rooms in my career, enough to stop being impressed by them. But I will be honest, this one is very good. There are 4 of them on the other side of the table. Their lead counsel, their acquisitions director, their CFO, and a woman named Sandra who is introduced as their integration specialist and who, I will find out later, is the person who actually decides whether these deals happen. Sandra has a yellow legal pad and she has not looked up from it since I sat down. I have my attorney beside me, a woman I have worked with for 2 years who charges a great deal and is worth every dollar. Her name is not important here. The offer is $83 million for my company. The one I started with 1 client and a lot of nerve in a sublet office with secondhand furniture because I believed in what I was building before anyone else did. $83 million. My attorney and I spend 4 hours in that room. We push on the retention agreements, on the equity rollover, on the earnout structure. We get the earnout improved. We get the retention bonuses protected. We get a clause I had specifically asked for written into the final agreement. The company name stays. The team stays. The work continues. By the time we shake hands and I ride the elevator back down to the lobby, it is almost 4 in the afternoon. I stand on the sidewalk outside the building, and the fog has burned off, and the sun is hitting the concrete, and I can hear the cable car on California Street. I call Theo. He answers on the first ring. I can hear him already smiling, which means he somehow already knows, which means Sandra talks to people. "Tell me," he says. 83, I say. He makes a sound that is not a word. Then, "I need to sit down," that is not a word. Then, "I need to sit down." "You can sit down," I say. "I'll wait." He laughs. I laugh. We talk for 20 minutes on a sidewalk in the financial district, both of us a little overwhelmed and trying not to be, the way you get when something you built with your own hands turns out to be real. After I hang up, I stand there for another minute. The cable car goes by again. I think about calling my mother. I don't. I tell my parents 2 days later. Not on the phone. I drive back to Scottsdale, which means another 4 hours. Which means I've made this drive more times in my life than I can count. I sit at their kitchen table with coffee I don't drink and I tell them. My father nods slowly. He says that's quite a number. He asks if I'm sure the deal is solid, whether I've had the contracts reviewed, whether I know what the tax implications are. These are not bad questions. They are the questions of a man running through an unfamiliar checklist, not a father sitting across from his daughter trying to take in what she just said. My mother says, "Does Lydia know yet?" I look at her. "No," I say. "I wanted to tell you first." She nods. "She'll be so happy for you," she says. There is something in how she says it, "for you," that makes it sound like an appendage, like she's adding it on at the end to make the sentence complete. Not because she actually believes it. I drive home that afternoon. The 4 hours feel longer than usual. The closing dinner is my idea. I want to celebrate with the people who actually helped build this. My core team, my attorney, Theo, a few of the clients who took a chance on us in the early days. I book a private room at a restaurant in the Mission, a place I've been to 100 times, with a chef I've watched become extraordinary over the last 3 years. I pick a Tuesday. I send the invitations. My parents are on the list. I send them an invitation because they are my parents, because I still, despite everything, want them there. This is not rationality. This is something older and stupider than rationality, and I have made my peace with it. They are SBP, yes. Tuesday comes. The private room is warm, amber lit, with a long table and a view into the open kitchen so you can watch the line work. There are 22 people. Theo is there, already holding a cocktail and wearing a suit he bought specifically for the occasion. My attorney is there with her husband. 3 of my project managers are there with their partners. 2 clients I've known for years. My parents arrive at 7:15. I watch them from across the room. My father in his good navy blazer, my mother in the black dress she wears when she wants to look like she belongs somewhere. They look around the room. I see my mother register the people, the space, the level of the occasion, and something moves across her face. I can't name it exactly. It's not pride, not quite. It's something adjacent to recognition. Like she's seen me in a room and, for the first time understanding that I take up space in it, Lydia couldn't make it. She had an opening in San Jose she couldn't reschedule. I believe her. That's fine. I had genuinely hoped she'd be here, and I mean that without irony. The food comes out in courses. The chef has done something extraordinary with the menu. A whole progression I let her design herself. The wine is very good. The conversation around the table is easy and warm in the way of people who have been through something together and are allowed, finally, to sit down. Around 9 o'clock, Theo stands up. He has a champagne glass and he has clearly been thinking about this for a while. He starts talking about when we first met, how I showed up to that first meeting with a stack of drawings and a spreadsheet so detailed it intimidated his entire team. He talks about the project we almost lost, the one that would have ended us in year 2, and how I spent 3 days straight reworking the structural analysis until we found the solution. He talks about the people in this room, what they've contributed, what we've built. Then he looks at me. She never asked anyone to believe in her, he says. She just kept working until there was nothing left to doubt. He raises his glass. 22 people raise theirs. I feel something release in my chest. Something I didn't know I'd been holding. I look at my parents. My father is holding his glass up, nodding slowly. My mother is looking at me with an expression I have not seen before in her face aimed at me. It takes me a moment to identify it. It's the expression she usually saves for Lydia. I hold eye contact with her for just a second. Then I raise my glass to the room. 3 weeks after the closing dinner, my mother calls me. She wants to have lunch, just the 2 of us, somewhere I choose. She doesn't say why. I pick a cafe in Hayes Valley that I like, a place with good coffee and windows that open in the afternoon. We sit across from each other. We order. There is a moment of silence that is not comfortable but is not hostile, just present. The kind of silence that has been building for a long time and has finally been given a table to sit at. My mother says, "I've been thinking about what Theo said at the dinner." "Okay," I say. "About you never asking anyone to believe in you." She turns her coffee cup in its saucer. "I've been wondering if that's something we did. Your father and I." I look at her. She is not crying. She is doing something harder than crying. She is sitting with something uncomfortable and not trying to make it smaller. I think about the bracelet in the navy box, about the toast, about every family dinner and every graduation and every phone call where she asked me to remind her what my company was called. I think about my grandmother's quilt, about what she told me when I was 12. I think, I say carefully, that you and Dad have always loved me. My mother nods. And I think, I say, that for a long time, loving me and seeing me were 2 different things. She is quiet. I want them to be the same thing, I say. If that's something you want too. My mother is quiet for a long moment. The cafe sounds around us. The espresso machine, someone's phone, a stroller rolling past the open window. Then she says, I didn't know how much I wasn't seeing. I thought I was seeing you. I know, I say. I think that's true. I think that's the hardest kind of thing. When the failure is not cruelty, not indifference, but just a long-running blind spot that no one ever named out loud. I am not entirely ready to forgive it. But I am, I realize, ready to say it, ready to put it on the table and see if we can both look at it. We eat our lunch. We talk, really talk, for the first time in years, about things that are not about Lydia, or the gallery, or my mother's committees, or my father's golf handicap. We talk about my grandmother. My mother tells me a story about Edith I hadn't heard from before I was born, about a year when the family almost lost the house, and it was my grandmother who held everything together, methodically, quietly, without asking for recognition. She would have been so proud of you, my mother says. I believe her. There's a photograph on my desk now. In it, I'm standing in the middle of my team at the site of the Oakland project, about 3 months before the acquisition closed. Everyone is in hard hats. The building behind us is mid-frame, half-finished, steel and sky. I'm laughing at something someone has said just out of frame. I don't remember what. I look in that photo like someone who is exactly where they're supposed to be. My grandmother's thimble is in a small glass dish beside it. I found it in the back of a drawer when I was cleaning out a box of things she'd left me. I'd always known it was somewhere, had spent years meaning to look properly. It's silver, worn smooth with a tiny pattern of leaves around the rim. She used it for decades. It's the most useful thing I own. The acquisition closed on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, the team had gone back to work. There were still projects to finish, still deadlines, still the unglamorous daily business of building things that hold. I went back to work too. That was always the plan. But some Thursday mornings, when the fog is settling over the bay and I'm standing at my kitchen window with both hands around a coffee mug, I think about the table I used to sit at and wait for someone to say my name. I think about all the energy I spent at that table. The patience, the endurance, the careful way I kept my hands folded and my face composed while someone else's name took up all the air in the room. And I think about the room I'm in now, the table I built, the people around it who showed up because they wanted to be there, who raised their glasses when it matters, who have never once needed to be reminded what I do or what I've built. My grandmother had a word for that kind of company. She used it the way some people use the word family. I understand now what she meant. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out when exactly I stopped waiting. It wasn't the night of the dinner. It wasn't even the drive home. 4 hours of highway in desert dark and the particular silence that comes after you've held yourself together in public for too long. I think it happened somewhere smaller than that. Maybe the moment I carried my parents' plates into the kitchen and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not because anything had been resolved, but because I had finally, quietly, stopped expecting it to be. There's something nobody tells you about growing up invisible in your own family. The damage isn't dramatic, it doesn't announce itself. It accumulates the way dust does, slowly in the corners, until one day you notice the whole room has gone gray and you can't remember exactly when it happened. I spent years trying to earn my way into a spotlight that was never going to swing in my direction, not because I wasn't worthy of it, but because the people holding it had already decided where to point it. That's not cruelty. It's just a kind of blindness. And understanding the difference between those two things took me longer than I'd like to admit. What I know now is this: the life you build in the absence of recognition is still a life you built. Every client I called when nobody knew my name. Every project I finished when the margins were thin and the doubt was loud. Every morning I showed up to a company that existed because I believed in it before anyone else did. That work was real. The lack of applause didn't make it less real. It just meant the work had to be its own reward for a long time, and somewhere in that stretch of years I got good at finding that reward without needing anyone else to hand it to me. My grandmother Edith understood this. She taught 31 years of math to teenagers who mostly didn't want to be in her classroom, and she never once complained that the work was thankless. She just kept doing it with precision and care, because that was what the work required. She used to say that integrity is what you practice when no one's keeping score. I didn't fully understand that when she told me. I understand that now with my whole body. The hard thing about the story I lived, the dinner, the bracelet, the toast that said my sister's name 12 times and mine 0, is that it didn't end with a dramatic confrontation. There was no moment where I stood up from the table and delivered the speech I'd been composing in my head for 30 years. I just drove home. I went to work on Monday. I sat across the table from 4 people on the 22nd floor of a building on California Street, and I negotiated, calmly and carefully, for the company I had built. And then it was done. What I've come to believe is that the people who dismiss you while you're building are not the villains of your story. They're just not the point of it. The point is the building. The point is the team that shows up, the work that holds, the room you walk into, knowing you earned your seat at the table because you built the table. My mother is learning to see me now. Slowly, imperfectly. And I am making room for that because she is my mother. And because people can change when they finally stop and look. But her seeing me is not what made me real. I was real the whole time. I just had to stop measuring that reality by whether she noticed. The thimble on my desk belonged to a woman who worked quietly for decades without asking to be celebrated. I keep it there because it reminds me that some of the most important things ever built were built by people. Nobody toasted. I am fine with that. I have my own table now.